Well, thank you. This is a story about Mandell Park. So I want to acknowledge Skip Almany, really, because I don't know that it would exist without him. And I know the Prairie would not be there without Skip. And so just a little bit of the history. It's a 1.2 acres, really small little park, city park at Mandell in Richmond. City had bought it back in the 80s and then sort of abandoned it, and then the neighborhood association adopted it. And in 92, there was the community gardens were established. And in 2004, I think then it reverted back to maybe the Parks Department, maybe at that time, and that's when the Friends of Mandell Park was formed. And it was formed to really to operate the park and this Adopt a Park program that HPART has. And they set out and they raised $1 million to construct a nice new park. And they were successful, and there's a new park built in 2014. And this is the design, this is the architectural design drawing of the park. Within the middle is the focus has always been the community gardens. And the garden plots there in the middle, and then this pocket prairie there is in the middle of the park too, surrounded by kind of a great lawn, but in this case it's kind of a mounded great lawn. And then this is bioswales. We refer to these as the bioswales. It's kind of a ditch where water can drain into this ditch. It's got kind of sandy soil, so I think it goes into a pipe out the bottom. So this is the vegetable garden plots, the raised bed. This is what it looks like. In the background there is referred to as Skip's shed. That's Skip. That's where a lot of the tools and stuff are stored. So the management of the park, you have the individuals are assigned, to the individual garden plots, and then there's composting is actually there's a big composting operation. I'm not familiar, but if you come next month, that can be part of the tour too. But they have their separate work days, and there's separate leaders and stuff for that. And then there's still, even Skip, I think, is still managing monthly work days on a given day of the month. They do whatever needs to be done in the park. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, maybe even besides the composting and the Prairie bioswale maintenance, which now I'm trying to lead. And so somebody named us the Native Plant Group. I like to think of it as the Ecological Garden Management Team. So far, we haven't been able to have too much of a regular meetings schedule because I'm out of town a lot, and it's a lot of focus on me. But the idea is to have a group of people, and I think there are probably people in the in this group that might want to participate. This is anybody that wants to be involved with learning plants, learning what ecological gardening is about. We're looking for leaders and owners, like if there's some people kind of can work on their own, and it may be that they can kind of adopt a certain part of the park. Even photographers, naturalists, enthusiasts. And I maintain an email list, so if you're interested, I can just put you on the email, so then you're kind of aware of what's going on. I have to start here, actually. This is Psalms Prairie. This is back in 2008. This is basically when I first realized that Houston was once this fantastic, diverse tallgrass prairie. It was really the first time I started learning the plants of the tallgrass prairie. So it was really probably the last remaining intact, really great prairie on the near west side. It was about 100 acres. And this is Psalms Road. This is I-10. But also notice that this is Addicks, the end of Addicks Reservoir Dam. So I don't know. It's like, like all of this development was really in the floodplain. And and I think that when they did they had to connect Greenhouse Road from up here to I-10, and and they had to destroy it. So the rumors were, as soon as they started covering the prairie, these neighborhoods started flooding. I think they built detention basins here, but I don't think they work as well as prairies. So it's still, I don't know, it's still kind of a shame that, and I think about what Houston lost by not saving this prairie. But it contained, it was highly diverse, and so we gained permission to dig it up, big and small scale. So we got, a lot of the plants got transferred to different sites, a lot of different sites. There was a lot of projects involved in this, and probably not many of those plants or sites really survived that long, but it did start a pocket prairie movement. I think what happened there, and it really, Houston's prairie awareness really was kicked up. So this is Flo Hanna and installing the very first pocket from those plants at Psalms here at the old Mandell Park. Flo referred to this as the peanut prairie. It was really small, and it was hard to manage because it was so small, and it didn't have nice hardscape borders to it. And even one day somebody came in and tilled it up, thinking it was, I don't know, it was open space for a garden. And actually, the plants came back actually, and during the construction of the new park in 2014, the plants were moved off-site. So then the new park was built, and I was presented with this rather large area for a pocket prairie. I didn't know how large it was going to be. I couldn't really get in during the construction phase, but when I first saw this, they didn't have these divider paths, and so I said we had to design some sections here because that's the way I see that it needed to be managed. And so the contractor that was still on site, put in these really nice flagstone divider paths. So we divided it into 5 different sections. And I also told him to mound up this section some and this section some, thinking, I don't know, I wanted a little topography. So that's what we did. And I also created a plan. And the main thing about the plan is that I created themes for each section. So in this small section here, I said I want to plant major tall grasses that's found in the prairies. And the section 2, I'm going to plant, Texas coneflower and milkweeds, and these 2 sections were, slightly depressional, so they're going to be a little bit wetter, and I know Texas coneflower likes it a little bit wet. Section 3 is I kind of labeled that a pimple mound, and so I tried to decide, what plants I had seen growing on pimple mounds to decide, what to plant there. And section 4 back in the back was, kind of flat, and that was going to be fall color, so I wanted to plant, sunflowers and engulfed muley that it shows well in the fall, and a little blue stem that shows in the fall, and actually Latris baccteata too, that blooms really late for Latris. And then this section I called it the Latris patch, and I planted dozens and dozens of Latris pycnostaceae. So here's what it looked like the first year. This is the grasses. It's a small section, but I put in brown seed, Florida paspalum, switchgrass, Indian grass, big blue stem, and eastern gamma grass, actually. So this was section 2, the coneflower milkweed sections. Also was bush mint and Elytris acidota. So here's the pimple mound section with some white prairie clover, Rudbeckia grandiflora. And in that same section on this corner down here, in the bottom here was a wetter area that stayed really wet initially, and I planted ironweed there. This was the fall color section, and showing rosinweed and Elytris bracteata and swamp sunflower and the Gulf muley. And the Elytris patch, I think you can see there's some Elytris growing, and then there's the black-eyed Susan, and this was echinacea that I planted down here. This is that same section. I planted Gulf Doom paspalum here, and I knew it was kind of aggressive, and I put in a root barrier. Didn't really work, but. So here's what it looked like in year 1. It was working pretty well. You can see it to some extent. There's the red, there's the Gulf muley, and there's the blue sage was one of the things that worked really well in the pimple mound initially. Okay, year 2. Plants grow. That's a favorite saying of mine. So here's that sunflower section showing the rosinweed just really took off really well. And actually for a little while the Elytris bracteata did well, but it soon declined. And this first year the swamp sunflower did really well. And this was not, I didn't really think of this as a dry section, but I think there was a period where it maybe got really dry, and that's what the reason that the swamp sunflower declined. This is the Elytris patch. And this, shows wine cups that were doing really good early. And the lyre leaf sage is what you see a lot in here. And it actually worked really well because it functioned as a really good ground cover, initially. So that year 2, it was a great Elytris scene. It worked really well with also with the rattlesnake master in the back. But the Gulf Doom paspalum was just growing too fast, and it was already escaping my root barrier. So this is one of the few plants that I decided I was too scared of it. I removed it. It was really quite a job to remove it, but I felt that was the right decision at the time. But it's a really neat plant, though. It has really tubular sort of leaves, and it has a great show. So in the right situation, I think it's a great plant. It would be a great plant. It probably likes a little wet. This again, it's at the edge, one of these edges where it probably stays wetter. So, and now this is kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but I can't go through every year because it's been a while. But this is a picture of the whole prairie in spring of the 3rd year. I'm skipping ahead to the last couple of years. I threw this one in kind of at the last minute. This is the spike rush. This is it likes really wet conditions, and in the first year I was trying to remove it from one of the sections, and it's kind of difficult to remove, but I decided actually I kind of like the way it looks now. So this is right along the edge of the pimple mound.
Does it take over?
Well, it takes over an area, but it doesn't try to it's kind of limited because of the pimple mound, because it gets drier. Here's a picture from this is the grass section. This kind of shows how plants move around a lot. So this is, this is the Whoops. So the eastern gamma grass, because it gets really big, and I have transplanted some of it to the bioswales, but there's also the partridge pea and the black-eyed Susan and the bee balm is growing in here. So plants really move around a lot. And two milkweeds that seem to be doing pretty well are this aquatic and butterfly milkweeds, and it's actually in the pimple mound area. The aquatic milkweed is actually growing in with the spike rush, because it likes really wet too. And this butterfly milkweed, there's one plant that's in the same section. It's up a little bit further toward the top of the mound. It's been around now for a few years, and so it gets bigger and bigger. Butterfly milkweed is a plant that theoretically can get really big, and and they could be 100-year-old. And so I'm hoping it's going to get bigger and bigger. I haven't seen it produce seeds yet. So, and I'm continuing to try new plants. This is one that I put in about a year ago. This is the Dahlia compacta. I think there's some of it in section 2 and in section 5. I would like to do more. I mean, I need to get in and do more planting, and plants that have disappeared, maybe try them again. And this is that hairy sunflower. I'm assuming it's hairy sunflower. That's what Flo identified it as. I think there's, in other parts of the country, there's other sunflowers that look similar, but I think here, I feel pretty sure it must be hairy sunflower. And these are like 4 feet tall, and they moved from that section 4 down to this grass section. And they've been here for a few years, so they seem to be really happy. And it is a little bit wetter section. And this is that same section. This kind of shows that, what I like to do. See, there's a trail here, and it's, every few weeks you need to I try to get in there and trim the trails and open it up. And anytime it's falling over the edge here, I just cut it off. And, so there's always work like that to be done. Also notice what happened, the Friends of Mandell Park attempted for years to keep the crushed granite paths in the park free of any vegetation, and they finally gave up. I mean, they were trying torches and all sorts of devices. And a lot of places now, it's a Bermuda grass that's coming in. But what's happened here is frog fruit. It's escaped from the prairie into the crushed granite, and even though it's weed-eated a lot, it forms this really nice mat that's only like a half an inch tall. And here's the coneflower section that I'm about to cut, and it sort of looks like this. And when I cut it, I might leave a few things now and then, but a lot of times I just cut the whole thing down, and I really cut it most of the time as low as I can go and just take all the debris off. And I'm actually now thinking that I should be doing this more often, because I really think this promotes a higher diversity, and higher diversity is what you want. Now, I mean, here's one thing that I'm kind of currently evaluating. This is Florida paspalum, and it's gotten really thick in the pimple mound area for the last 2 years. I don't know, but a lot of times when this happens, if you just wait, sometimes the plants just naturally decline for whatever reason. And so I'm thinking, I don't think it's as thick this year. So in this case, it's not like there's no way I can remove these, because, there are clumps everywhere. So I just have to see what happens. So this is this year. So my original plan for the coneflowers worked out pretty well. I did plant some milkweeds in that section There's some ornithoroides that didn't survive and some other milkweeds that didn't survive. There are some of the viridis in this section. They don't really show that much, but that's another thing I think at this time I can go back and start planting more milkweeds. So this is that same section. And also I just kind of wanted to point out that there's one thing that is growing in this section now is tropical puff. And that's what some of these things are here. And I literally have collected, I don't know if it's just one plant or what, but it is prolific producer of seeds. I've collected probably thousands of seed from that one plant. This is the pimple mound section. This year, this is that wet area where the spike rush is. I think this might be mistflower. I didn't plant it. Somehow it found its way there, and there's the loose strife. And I think these white spots here are the aquatic milkweed. The blue sage was really thick in this section for the first 2 or 3 years, and it has gradually declined. This is that fall color section where I planted the swamp sunflower initially, and the hairy sunflower. And the hairy sunflower moved down here to be with the grasses, and then the swamp sunflower actually moved over here to a wet spot over here. So now I've got Maximilian sunflower there. So I know it can be a.
Did you plant that?
Yeah. So I know Maximilian sunflower can be a monster, but it didn't really do that much last year, and so I don't. Well, it's not getting that super tall. So if it's a drier area, it should do well. So we'll see. I mean, this is an area where I had planted the Laetris bracteata. It didn't last very long. There was a lot of rosin reed in here. There's still a little bit, and it has moved around to different places in the prairie. Yes?
Did you mention irrigation? Is there any irrigation?
I didn't mention irrigation. There is irrigation in that planting plot. There is sprinkler heads. And so initially, I think there was a period where it got turned off for more than a year, and that might have been some impact on some things. But right now, it can be watered separately from the rest of the park. And I told them to water maybe longer than it's like 20 minutes once a week or something like that. Yeah, so this is a new sign that I put in last year to kind of highlight the ecological gardening concepts. And this is that Laetris patch where there's no Laetris anymore. The rattlesnake master survived. It is a place where some of the annuals, like the partridge pea and the bee balm and the black-eyed Susan, sometimes produce real nice shows. So I don't want to go over these, but this is just a list of some of the plants that declined and went away. Some of them went away really quickly. Some of them maybe declined over 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and for the most part I think most of them are gone now. But I would suggest that there's some of these I still want to try again. But some of them, the rarer ones for our area, maybe it's just we shouldn't really expect them to do really well in gardens necessarily. But in some cases, you can find the right microhabitat for them to be happy. And this is some of the ones that are there. So I'm just, there's probably a lot more than even this listed here. So I'm just saying that I tried a lot of plants. So. And I thought I'd go over this, try to do this quickly, but this is I actually wrote down some of my design thoughts back in 2014 and comparing them to my current thinking. And my current thinking has changed quite a bit. Because right when I did start, I guess I thought it was possible to sort of put in a garden like this and make it look like a conventional garden, whatever that means. I'm not sure what that means now. But I think now the focus is it's an ecological garden. It's really gardening for wildlife. It's diversity of plants is the key. You know, I sort of falsely believe that you could keep it all well organized, perhaps, and stuff. But that's you know, I just think we need to rethink what pretty is. It's the complex plant system is what we want, and really, if we really think about it, it's a better look, actually. Groups of single species. I mean, we want this complex plant community, and the plants are going to move. And I mean, we can manage it to some extent, but we need to pay attention to where they want to be. You know, 100% real deal natives, which in the prairie is what I'm trying to. When I say real deal, they are locally from local populations, and I'm trying to honor that as much as possible. And I think I have in the prairie section. And you know, and we were presented with this nice hardscape border, and that makes it really nice. That's really a good thing to have. And initially, I mounted up 2 of those sections, and I don't know. Those are the 2 sections that have been a little bit more problematic, you know, than the other sections. So I don't know. If I had it to do over again, I don't know if I'd do that. I think the ones that have kind of a slight depression seem to have done better. I don't know what I was thinking. I've never really been a fan of mulch, but in these sort of gardens, the mulch just doesn't work. There's no room for the mulch, and I sort of think mulch even promotes weeds. Themes for each, yeah, I think it's a really good process to go through and try to come up with a really good plan initially. Now, you know, it may not work out, but so you have to still listen to where the plants want to be. Plant ID, I did create plant ID labels for all the plants. It's just that it's a big job to try to keep track of those and move them around, and you know, they get covered up and stuff. So it's a difficult thing. It's just other thoughts are is that I think you should be slow to judge what's happening. You know, don't jump to the conclusions of what's going to be there next month or next year or 2 years from there. And I just believe that what we're trying to do is get to us, you know, you're wanting a landscape where you can manage mostly by just trimming it and cutting it back rather than having to weed. And I'm thinking now that probably cutting back more often than I've done in the past is probably the thing to do. And I think it's also in honoring the wildlife, you're only wanting to cut back maybe 1 or 2 sections at a time. You know, so you don't want to just mow down everything. So anyway, in the last couple of years, we're now into managing the bioswales, which is highlighted in yellow here. And the original plants in the bioswales were basically spider lilies and iris and muhly grass. I don't know, you know, it's the grass they use in landscapes. I don't know. I don't think it's Gulf Coast muhly, but and then ball cypress and sweet bay magnolia. Those was it, I think. So the iris and the lilies would kind of cover the ground, but there weren't enough of them. There was still a lot of bare ground, and so there's a lot of weeds that would grow. And the bioswales got sandy soil, and very well drained. So it's an opportunity to grow stuff that I've never grown before, because there are some things that I'm planting now that I've never planted never survive in clay. And the prairie is basically, you know, the prairie was not amended soil. It's maybe not super heavy clay, but it's clay soil. And now in the bioswales too, you got a lot of the, you know, cypress, and so it's shady. Some areas of it is shady. So you got to think about different types of plants for that situation. So our native plant group, are looking for more members. We got some here tonight. Susan Green and Susie Shapiro is here somewhere. And anyway, the idea now is to do a better job of producing plant systems in the bioswales. And we're wanting to cover the ground, and we're not removing any of the original plants. I mean, some of them have sort of died, declined, but we're not removing any of them. We're just planting around them and trying to get to the place where we're kind of would be managing the bioswales a little bit more like we've been managing the prairie, where you just kind of cut back and trim more often. So here's an example in the bioswale. We've used three kind of viney ground covers. One is the Corpus Christi fleabane and frog fruit and spot flower that have helped cover the ground. And like this is in the bioswale. We planted this and didn't seem like it was doing much for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's like great. So this is Corpus Christi fleabane. There's probably some frog fruit in it too, and this is actually a swamp sunflower. So this is a bioswale, garden bioswale, because it's kind of adjacent to the gardens. And this is some of the things that we've been planting in there. And this area is a bioswale that is fairly sunny. So a lot of the plants, same plants we've been using in the prairie, we're planting in this bioswale. And I didn't really know how well things would work, because even though it is a ditch depression, it's sandy and very well drained. So typically it feels very dry. But so far things have been growing in it great. If it's, sandy, silty soil is usually you can grow about anything in it, I think. This is the bioswale just adjacent to the prairie, and down in the bottom of it, the spot flower. This is the spot flower that's doing well. And this is in the bioswale, and the swamp sunflower is doing well. The swamp sunflower can, it can get these really long things and hang over stuff. So like in the bioswale here, I just trim it back. If it's getting out of the bioswale, I just cut it off. And this is aster. I'm not sure which kind, but it just appears and stuff. And I know what, it produces this really nice bloom later in the fall. And I think this is actually, and these were planted, I don't know. We've also planted buttonbush that's doing well, and I think this is a Mexican buckeye that we planted. There's Illinois bundleflower that should be just to the right of that. There's probably some ironweed that is edges there. So here's that sort of the same bioswale, but this is underneath the cypress tree, so it's very shady. And here's some of, we've planted, obedient plant, Scutellaria vata, originally came from Katy. And here, and so I'm planted pawpaw and spice bush. This is two examples of stuff that I think might do well in this soil conditions that I would never grow in clay.
You said the sandy soil. Is it added sandy soil? Do they put it? Okay.
Yeah.
So
no. This is all.
For
yeah, and I don't know what the specs were on anything like that. I think calling it sandy is a good description. But it's that sandy, silty type of soil that's just, it's really loose, really hard, easy to dig in. And the water drains to it. I guess it sort of goes to a pipe maybe somewhere. I haven't.
Have you tried Leatrice pygmastachia in there?
Well, no, that could work.
It's sort of wet.
Yeah.
Well drained.
This is actually just another sort of shot at that from that same spot, but these big these are the big spider lilies that were originally planted that are there. Yeah, and like the later, this is the Gulf vervain. Works really well. I mean, it doesn't cover the ground very well, but that's what these blue things here is, this verbena zutha. And I like it. It blooms for a really long time. And I don't know, it looks really great. This is just adjacent to the prairie, and there's a lot of stuff in this small area, you know, but there's sunflowers, maybe even Maximilian and swamp sunflower here, and grasses. Now this is this is a little area that we refer to as the Mandell bioswale. It's kind of adjacent to Mandell, out not far from Richmond, but and we've been planting stuff in here for now maybe a couple of years, but it's still a work in progress. It's, you know, that you know, you just have to work at it a while. You keep planting stuff, and then you weed it and trim it, and then you repeat and repeat. And this is still kind of a work in progress. This is the sign garden. This is Susan Green manages this garden. This is the Richmond bioswale. We just really started working on some of this year, and we've this muhly grass we cut it back after the freeze. It was the first time it's been cut back since the park was installed, and so we planted a lot of stuff in here. But there's all this bare ground, so it'll take another couple of years to try to get this plant system going. I have planted some, like, you know, again, some of these areas are a little bit shadier, so I planted like, you know, some arrowwood viburnums and this is the Richmond bioswale in the middle. Doesn't look too bad. This is kind of post-freeze where everything has grown back. We had to cut everything back. And this is looking along Richmond toward the east, and there's a lot of iris and stuff that remains here. So there's not that many open gaps right here, but a little bit further down, we have a problem with goldenrod is wanting to take over this area, and we're you know, my idea is that we're going to try to maintain a kind of a flower garden, wildflower garden here, and keep the goldenrod at bay. We'll see how well that works. But really, I think the ecological gardening is for the wildlife, and I haven't had much time to, you know, eye that, the wildlife there, but, you know, I think we need to document the wildlife that's been using Mandell to tell that story. This was this year with this. I saw this Gulf fritillary, and it was, you know, 1st of March. So this is pretty like a week after the big freeze. So, and this is a brand new fresh butterfly. And so did the chrysalis survive the freeze? Did it survive as an adult? I don't know. I mean, but it was in a little pat. I was sort of cutting back this section, but there was this section where it was that I was leaving. It was kind of in little blue stem, I think. There's a lot of stuff that really likes the ironweed, and you know, I really think people are more attracted to wildlife probably than plants. So, you know, telling the wildlife story is really going to be great for attracting more public attention. The monarchs really like the aquatic milkweed. They love it. And I don't know. I didn't have that many pictures of insects. So here's kind of a sand wasp I took a picture of one day. And this is my favorite sort of, is these robber flies are my favorite insects, and these bee mimic robber flies are a favorite robber fly. That's really all I had, and just maybe call your attention to these are some of the inspirational books that I've seen. Is that, of course, Doug Tallamy tells you why native plants are so important. And actually I just was out in Colorado and saw that he has this new book that I've just started reading about oaks. So it tells you the many reasons that oaks are so important and all the insects they support. And it's interesting, I think he goes through it month by month during the year. And this Planting in a Post-Wild World and Garden Revolution are really speak to what ecological gardening and creating plant systems is all about. And this A New Garden Ethic by Benjamin Voigt he really takes it to another level too, about telling you why you want to do. He's really an advocate for using 100% native plants. So that's really all I have. And here's my contact information. Like I say, I maintain this. If you want any questions about what's going on in Mandell, or possibly if you have any other projects you want to talk about, and if you want to get on my email list for the native plant group at Mandell, just contact me.